You talk about a different era where it feels like we're moving into a different era in the sport, in the men's game. Rogers retired. Now 2 years later, Rafa's going to follow suit. Who knows how much longer we'll have Novak as the last remaining member of the big three. But how does it feel to you, this moment? And it felt similar when Sampras was hanging up the racket, a little bit transition for the sport on the men's side, and how you feel sort of just in general with this passing of the torch from one generation to the Sinners and Alcarazes, who are now ready to carry forward and carry men's tennis forward with their efforts and accomplishments already.
Yeah, Mike, it's a huge signpost moment. Not really just in tennis. I'd say in sports, and to some degree even culturally, I think it is. I mean, I guess what you realize is how deep the connections become when players play this long and they play each other this often. Obviously, you can use the triangle, or you can go into other geometry if you like, but you want to add Andy Murray and Wawrinka, people like that into the mix. But I mean, Djokovic, Nadal, and Federer have had their tribes, their camps, their matchups, their rivalries have been amazing. Look how close ultimately the head-to-heads will be. 31-29 for Novak over Rafa. Well, for 60 matches. Crazy. And I think people just got really connected to it, and it became part of the rhythm of life globally in some ways. Not everybody's as into tennis as some certain nations are, but I mean, you go almost anywhere on the planet and people would have heard of one of those guys or all three of those guys. And so it's a big thing, and it takes a long time to create that kind of history and attachment, and everybody kind of digging in and making an appointment viewing. You can sense the Sinner Alcaraz vibe is potentially similar.
It's off to a good start.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, they have to mature into their roles, but they match up really well. And so, but that's it's still very, very early. And what you realize is just what it takes, everything that has to go right and to some degree wrong for those 20 years of rivalries to take place. And you think back on it, I mean, Oregon McEnroe, storied rivalry. They only played 14 times. Novak and Rafa played 60 times. You can go back to Laver and Rosewall and the barnstorming days. They played more than 100 times. Chrissy and Martina, obviously, but really in the modern men's game, this has no precedent. And I know I'm going to miss it for sure. And it was great because it wasn't just two guys. If it had been two, we might have gotten tired of it. But that there were three with some occasional infiltrators, that made it really, really special.
Yeah, pretty perfect era. And I think you hit the nail on the head. We're talking about Rafa, Roger, Novak as well. These are three global sporting icons. And, you read the tributes from some of these players like Tsitsipas and Rublev, and how they were watching the television when they were 5, 6, 7 years old, donning the Rafa gear and imagining the chance to play professional tennis. It's not often that you get these types of athletes that inspire a whole new wave of generations. And, you covered him for obviously a couple decades, and it's often brought up the type of sports person he was. Do you have any memorable interactions you might be thinking back to in your years covering Rafael Nadal?
Well, be honest, man, I'm not going to share everything because I want to save a little bit for my readers. There are a lot of good stories. I think all of us who've been around Rafa over the years at any capacity would have some memories about sort of his ability to empathize and his ability to make note of you, whatever role you played in the tennis microcosm. I think that's a special thing about him. He didn't really differentiate between superstars of his ilk or journalists or people running the transport or people doing the transcripts. I mean, he's somebody who noticed people and was, I think, raised to notice people and to see them and to make them feel seen, which I think is really a special thing. And I'll save my one big anecdote for the book, but I feel like it's ultimately that's a really, really hard thing to do in a world where you're being catered to 24/7 for 20 years, to be able to continue to behave well. In some ways, it's a normal way to behave for you or for me, but when you're in that situation where you are being constantly treated as if you're God's gift, it's very not so easy to keep your feet on the clay or your feet on the ground.